On this episode, author Adam Bernard, one hit wondering the stories of 40 one-hit wonders.
All right, today's guest is a music industry veteran who's been working in media since 2000. He's old school enough to have written a newspaper column, been one of the original music bloggers, and pens 14 national magazine cover stories along the way. His new book, One Hit Wondering, The Stories of 14 One-Hit Wonders and Other Tales from the Crates, is out now. Joining us now, let's welcome Adam Bernard. Adam, man, what's up?
Thank you so much for having me on the show. First of all, I love your haircut. I really need to,
right?
to get that out.
Definitely, it's a time saver, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right?
It works.
It definitely works. Yep. So this idea for this book, this was originally, I think, a column.
Yes.
You were going to write before this was the book, right?
Yeah. One Hit Wondering started as a column on Adam's World, adamsworldblog.com. And I still have it as a column. Once a month, the last Friday of every month, unless there's the holiday, and then I switch it up. What I do is I take the album of a one-hit wonder. I find 3 songs other than the hit that people should hear. And then I do a deep dive on the artist to show people that they are more than one song, that they have done other things in music, and that their lives are legitimately interesting and worth knowing about.
Definitely. And the 80s are obviously commonly associated with, many one-hit wonders, multiple artists, that have gone through there. Definitely. So let's probably touch upon that. We'll go through the decades here a little bit. So some of the 80s artists you highlighted: Atlanta Miles, Eddie Brickell, New Bohemians, Rockwell. A couple names that stand out for me. Atlanta Miles really stood out. She had that Black Velvet song, which was killer back in the day, and then it was like, okay, what happened? So maybe I don't know if you could speak to any of those or her and tell us maybe what happened to some of them.
I mean, a lot of Miles, talk about lightning in a bottle. At one point in time, she was the most played song on radio ever. And I think, just from my perspective, she has other great songs on that self-titled album. Really great songs. Take advantage of those vocals that she had, those beautiful gravelly blues vocals. But I feel like when you have that lightning in a bottle moment, when you are the biggest thing in the world like that no one's ever seen before, man, it's tough to follow that.
I was going to say, that's got to be so much pressure for the artist, right? So the record company's like, okay, you can do this again. When are you doing it again? Because you need to do it.
I remember I was reading Peter Frampton's autobiography. He mentions when, his album that took over everything, and his manager called him up and he's like, "You have the number 1 album." He goes, "That's great." He goes, No, ever. He goes, "You've got the most sales ever." And apparently Frampton's first thought was, I can't follow this.
Right.
How am I gonna, you can't follow the biggest ever. Anything else is going to be a letdown. So Atlanta Miles is such a perfect example of this artist who has this perfect song and other great songs that ended up getting ignored because of that one perfect song.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go forward a little bit into the 90s. Obviously, the early 90s boom, the CD era excess, labels splintering, throwing money at diverse acts. Things were a little different and a little crazy going on there in that time period. You know what I mean? What was happening? How would you kind of describe that era yourself a little bit?
Oh, I think you nailed it. I think that's why we have so many legendary one-hit wonders from the 90s, is because labels were so flush with money from the advent of the CD that they said, "Oh, maybe we can get a hit out of you. We have money for days. We're just going to throw money at this, throw some singles at the wall and see if it connects." Plus, you had MTV in its absolute heyday, playing videos 24 hours a day. You had other networks, BET, VH1, CMT. If you made a music video, they found a place to play it.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why we had so many one-hit wonders, because you could have a hit, and if the second single doesn't hit, the label just says, who cares? We have 8 million other bands. We're going to throw this other band out there, and let's go. And it left a lot of bands sort of, out to dry, but they still made music afterwards. They didn't just disappear after, the label said they didn't want to release any more records.
Yeah, I've talked to some artists kind of about that. So depending on how much backing they got or support, if they didn't hit, the label was kind of thinking about, okay, who do we have next in the stable to try out? Right, these guys aren't making it right now, and then they would lose some of their support. It would go to the next people in line.
It was an assembly line, basically.
Yeah, definitely. So let's go forward a little bit from there. So 95, 2000, CDs are starting to not be as commonplace as they were. We're starting to see the rise of MP3s, things like that are happening. File sharing is starting to happen. Napster is going to happen, which changed the game completely for this. Obviously, in my mindset, the record companies didn't know what to do about that at all.
I think it took very forward-thinking people to try to figure that out, and not a lot of labels had that. And this is not a knock on the labels, because how are you supposed to be able to predict what Napster was going to do? But I did know a publicist who would put the name of the hot new song and the hot new artist, but actually upload an album sampler in its place to Napster. So when people are going for the song, they get the album sampler and be like, well, wait a minute.
I saw those files. I saw that definitely happening. That was a good trick. Yeah.
Yeah. So but I mean, it's just, I remember in high school, to age myself, recording tapes for friends, CD to tape, when one of us would get the album and the other one wanted it. Heck, we were still doing it in college, even though Napster existed. We would still do that if we wanted the full album, because let's face it, the high-speed internet wasn't quite a thing yet. So I remember doing that, but doing that on a international level with high-speed internet, no one could have predicted that would happen. And it changed everything, and I'm not sure the music industry reacted necessarily properly to it. But also, it's very easy to say that in hindsight.
Right.
They're not looking at their books.
Yeah. I think they thought, this is going to just be another bump in the road. It's going to change back, and they wanted to keep kind of doing business as usual. I was hoping they were going to see the light, and was like, okay, so maybe we'll have a Warner Brothers site, and you want to stream stuff or get stuff from your Warner Brothers artist, you go to their site or whatever, EMI or Atlantic or whoever. And obviously somebody realized it eventually. Steve Jobs realized that with iTunes, right? And now it's all gone to streaming,
And you know what? You might still be right in the future, because all those streaming sites have contracts with labels, and a label could decide, you know what? We want more of the piece of the pie.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to see that at some point. The artist is not going to see that.
Oh, no, not at all. Of course, the artist always gets screwed. My friend Jake Palumbo, Space Lab Recordings, always says, if you think this is bad for artists, wait till you see what they come up with next.
Yeah.
Because it's not going to get better.
Yeah, there's definitely some scary stuff coming up down the line. Obviously, as we're seeing the rise of AI, artificial artists, they're creating, these artists supposedly with this music, and then feeding the music back to different AIs and things like that. It's really weird and scary where that might head.
I'm sure you've received those press releases too about the AI artists. And my big thing with those is, what does the rest of that publicist roster think of this? Because you can't have an AI artist without theft of another artist's work. So if you're a legitimate artist and you see your publicist is pushing an AI artist, your publicist is pushing the theft of your own work.
Yeah.
I don't understand how there's not more rebellion against that. And I'm obviously in the artist communities, there's incredible rebellion against it, but I hope there becomes full-on rebellion in just the listener community. I hope we don't accept it on streaming services. I hope that we get more services that are marking things as
Yeah.
AI, so we know not to listen.
Yeah, obviously, I think iTunes was the first one to say that we're going to label anything that's, AI, we're going to have it labeled. I haven't seen that the other services are following suit, but I'm sure they will. They definitely will follow suit with that and show all that. But the thing that concerns me with that is the younger generation being more acceptable of new technology. Are they going to accept that? Right? Because now we're in a space now where it's acceptable for bands to play music from their laptops. Right?
Yeah. That's like when you are an indie artist coming up and you don't even have the money to pay a band. I'm like, okay, you can go to your laptop as long as you're on your guitar. But at a certain point in time, that's worse than rapping over your vocals. That's just, I mean, come on, you're there to give someone a show. I do think there is going to be some rebellion in the current younger generation, because from everything I've read, they seem to be embracing ownership of artwork again. And, there's a little bit of a bump in CDs, just like there was a bump in vinyl.
Right. That's what they're saying. CDs are bumping. And actually, we're seeing cassette tapes coming back.
That's weird.
Yeah.
That's just weird. Like, listen, I way back in the day, I did write a column in defense of the cassette tape, because I do feel that it was the most difficult format for an artist to release an album, because, we weren't able to skip anything. So if they only had one good song, we weren't listening to that. We weren't listening to the album. So that was the toughest format for an artist. But as a listener, man, that was a terrible format.
Yeah, definitely. So let's get back to the topic here, the One Hit Wonders book. Maybe we can go through a couple of them here, and maybe you could tell our audience, give us a little bit more insight. Obviously, I'm from the 80s generation, so that's kind of where my One Hit Wonders came up. So one of the bands that always come to mind is Quarter Flash. They had the song "Harden My Heart" that came out. That was pretty big hit for them. They did have another song or two after that, but after that, I kind of think they faded away. And another one is Survivor, which was huge, right? Eye of the Tiger. They did, and again, they did have another song or two after that, that did well, but not that precipice again,
Yeah, that was that trend of the 80s when I started researching a lot of them. I was born in 78, so I grew up in the 80s and 90s. The trend of the 80s was the artists we think are one-hit wonders that actually somehow had another top 20 hit.
Right.
When I was looking up London Beat, I've been thinking about you. All of a sudden, they had another song that hit number 19. I was like, we don't recall that.
Right. Maybe there wasn't enough push behind it. We didn't know, right? There wasn't enough marketing to know.
And also, when you start calling a band, it's that prophecy of, we will now ignore the other songs,
Right.
which I find fascinating, because people will genuinely refer to Men Without Hats as a one-hit wonder, while they actually
Right.
had a song that was bigger than the Safety Dance. When Pop Goes the World was bigger. It was a number one song. It just sounds nothing like it. And when I'm doing that sort of research, it's fascinating to me how we've given bands labels, and it really happened mostly in the 80s. And maybe it's just the distance of time, but there are these great artists who had multiple hits. Even Aha, Take On Me, obviously one of the greatest songs.
Right.
Of
Breakthrough video on MTV. Obviously, they're memorialized for that. Yep.
And then they had The Sun Always Shines on TV, which was another, I don't know if you want to call it a hit, but it cracked the top 40. It had a video. And I remember I was writing a column I sometimes do columns on old top 40s. And that was in there. And a buddy of mine hit me up afterwards. He's like, I thought I knew every song from the 80s, but I'd never heard that Aha song. And it was somehow in the top 40.
Right.
So we somehow, maybe not somehow, maybe it's intentional that, radio programmers only have a certain amount of time. And they say, well, we're picking this song out. So that's why we remember the one song rather than any of the others.
Yeah. And I think it's really about the push and the marketing that I've just come to notice that within the last, probably 10 to 15 years. So much of the music that you like is because there's been repetition behind it. You've heard it so many times. You know what I mean? And so the question is, did that make it a hit, or was it a hit before that? What was the push behind it, right?
Yeah, there are definitely some bands that are in everybody's CD collection that, in retrospect, we look at them like, huh, 10 million people bought that. Like, yep. And not to say this is as the bands are bad, because listen, Hootie and the Blowfish are a legitimate band. Darius Rucker is a legitimate, great singer and songwriter. But Cracked Review was in literally everyone's CD collection because we heard Hootie and the Blowfish 17 times a day.
Yeah.
So whether or not we liked them to begin with, we damn sure were going to hold your hand. We were, the Dolphins are going to make us cry. We still know all those lyrics.
Yeah, and I can't remember the last time I heard that name with a song being played. I cannot,
Darius is still doing his thing in the country world. I think he says he's going to stop touring in 2 years, but he's like 60 now, so he's more than earned any vacation he wants to take.
Yeah, but yeah, it just fascinates me with that. Like you're saying, you hear some of these, and the folks don't realize they still had a lot of other good music if you give them a chance, and that's what you've done here. Like you were saying, you went back, you listened to these albums, and you found out, there's a lot more to these artists than the one song that maybe got the big push, that maybe hit at the right time, that maybe had the right sound, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that was the birth of the column. I love diving into dollar bins, whether it's CDs or vinyl, and that's where you'll find the majority of one-hit wonders. And that's not a knock on them as artists. That's because so many people bought the album for the one hit. And in the CD era, for those who weren't alive during it, it was like $16 for a CD. And, when people made the switch to streaming, they kind of got rid of their CDs. So those CDs ended up in the dollar bin. And when you can pick them up for $1, get every single song, get the liner notes, as someone who is a true music nerd, I go through those liner notes. And it's always fun to see who worked with who, some very unexpected stuff. And then when researching a duo like Boy Meets Girl and seeing, the work they did for Whitney Houston that helped launch her career, that very fascinating, interesting stuff. Someone like Meredith Brooks, who I talk about in every single interview, because I just think I went from being Bitch is a great song to going, oh my God, this is one of the most important women of the past 40 years in music. And it was just through all the research of what she's done and what she's accomplished behind the scenes. And these artists are so much more than that one song. They've done so much in music that's fascinating and interesting.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point there, looking at the physical product and reading the liner notes. Obviously, something that I grew up doing, when you got that new album, you dived into that, and you maybe came with all the lyrics, and lucky enough to have all the lyrics to the songs, maybe told you some stories, and obviously you thanked a lot of people for that. And the other thing, obviously, was the artwork. You usually, stood there and tried to make sense of that artwork if it reflected in the music at all. But I think that's something that's really lacking nowadays, that physical product where you could, I was one of those people, too, that I always read the liner notes to see, and especially if they were a big band that you liked, who's their fan club? Where are they located? If you want to write to them, there was those kind of things back then before this social media type of thing. That's one thing I think that's kind of lacking today.
Yeah. And I know some of the streaming services try to rectify that, but I don't think when people are listening on streaming, they're actually looking at what they're listening to. Whereas previous generations, whether they're holding a CD or a record, they were actually looking at what they were listening to and paying more attention to it. Unfortunately, I think a lot of streaming is passive listening and not active listening. And it's there, it's in the background, it's pleasant if you need it to be pleasant, it's aggressive if you're working out, but it's not something that you are thinking, oh, who's this artist? Let me go, look them up and find out more. Now, I'm old school. I still listen to the radio sometimes too, like in the car. And when I do, there have been times where I have pulled over so I could Shazam something.
Right. That's what I was going to say. They don't announce the names of the artists anymore in the radio. Like they think, I don't know if they think that's a waste of time or you have to, like you said, you have to Shazam it or something. But the regular people, you don't know who this artist is then.
I'm like, who is this? We have to find out quickly.
Right.
I hope I'm not on the highway because that'll be a problem. So it's like,
Right.
I will pull over, I will Shazam, and they'll be like, okay, good. Store that away. Remember, research. So the physical product, I mean, I hope it makes a true comeback someday. I know I'm an idealist. But something like One Hit Wondering doesn't happen without the physical product. It doesn't happen without those dollar bins. It doesn't happen without me maybe having spent $16 on some of these CDs back in the day. And it's such a wonderful way to discover old music. Everyone always has the new music discovery, but there's even more to be discovered in the past. And I hope that if physical product can make a comeback and people own a way to play CDs and a way to play records, they will go to these record stores and library sales and just say, you know what, $1, $2, $3, I'm going to take a risk on this. This band looks interesting.
Yeah, I'm hoping the same thing.
I've literally said, this band looks interesting. I'm going to pick it up. There have been ones where with the liner notes, I flipped it over and I've said, who produced this album? Oh, I'm picking this up based on that alone. And you get some surprises and you start going in other directions. And being a music nerd is just so much fun. And I hope that there's still others of us out there.
Yeah, definitely. I hope that we do see that. Certain bands are producing their product in all different forms. Sound like we talked about a couple minutes ago. You get the album will come out, the CD will come out, and some of these bands even they'll have packages where they'll have a lot of different stuff that come with the album. Maybe something for your turntable, maybe some stickers, autograph. It would be nice to see some of that included again. I remember back in the day, you would get your Kiss album, right? You would get stickers with that. You would get a love gun. You would get something a little extra that was a kind of cool thing to have. I wish we could turn back into a little bit of that in some way, shape, or form.
And I've seen some artists get really creative with that. There's a soul singer in New York City, Kendra Morris. She, with her album last year, the vinyl release opened up and it was a board game. And the insert slid out and you could literally punch out pieces and play the board game that was based on the songs on the album. That's really cool. And I know when it comes to packages, I know like the Pretty Reckless just had on like you can have vinyl on a t-shirt and things like that. And I prefer that to the VIP fan experience, which a lot of the artists are doing. I get it. People need to make money. But I feel like some of those VIP experiences have less to do with how important the fans are and more to do with how much money they can spend. And I don't like the concept of importance being mixed in with money, because I feel like that the artist that bought your album on the first day but could only afford the album isn't less of a fan than the fan who bought it and then spends $400 to do a meet and greet.
Yeah, definitely for sure. All right. So the book One Hit Wondering, the stories of 40 one-hit wonders and other tales from the crate, like we were saying, is out now from Adam Bernard. Adam, thank you so much for being with us. Folks, check out this book. You will not be disappointed.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you, and keep doing what you're doing.